The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister of Japan. I have the great pleasure in welcoming Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan and to invite him to address the General Assembly. Mr. Prime Minister.
Mr. Chairman, under your chairmanship, the United Nations will commemorate the 75th anniversary of its founding. On this occasion, I ask you to recall that my country, Japan, upholding the principles of the United Nations, has walked a path that has been steadfast, always intending to realize the goals of the United Nations. For the UN, which has now come 3/4 of a century since its founding, structural reform, especially that of the Security Council, is absolutely imperative. We aim for the early realization of such reform. In addition, Japan is standing in the 2022 election. By once again receiving the support of numerous countries, we wish to serve as a non-permanent member of the Security Council and make our best efforts towards the further realization of the principles of the UN. I ask for your ardent support in this. In Japan, a new emperor has succeeded to the imperial throne, and the ceremony for His Majesty to declare this fact to both domestic and international audiences near at hand on October 22. Heads of state and government and top leaders from approximately 200 nations and international organizations will attend, and there is no greater joy than that of the well-wishing extended to us upon the start of the Emperor's new era. The Japanese people regard this as an unparalleled opportunity, and they will once again turn their thoughts to the role Japan takes on towards the world. In my country, the period in which a long-standing economic slump caused the people to become inward-looking is now a thing of the past. Dates that raise awareness of our strong bonds with the world and turn people's eyes outward and towards the future, the Rugby World Cup, of which fierce contests continue to be played out at this very moment, the Olympic and Paralympic Games that will be held next year in Tokyo, and World Expo 2025 that Osaka and the surrounding region will host, are written large on Japan's calendar as landmark events. Created this way is a new generation of Japanese, one that is reliable and willing to carry forth the UN ideals, you may want to say. I would like you also to keep in mind the meeting that will come around to Japan next April. The 14th United Nations Congress on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, commonly known as the UN Crime Congress, will convene in Kyoto. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime holds the meeting once every 5 years. 50 years will have passed since 1970, when Japan hosted this same meeting as the first UN Crime Congress held outside Europe. At its prime for cherry blossoms, Kyoto, I know, will be welcoming visiting experts in law enforcement. What I have just said leads one to see what value Japan seeks in its engagement with the world, in that it values education, for the country's primary objective is to foster the power of individuals one by one. To continue to do so has been and still is the very essence of what Japan can contribute to the rest of the world. As for the law enforcement experts who will gather in Kyoto next spring, Japan has done nothing one-off, like bringing them to a meeting just once. Rather, it has long sought its own role in continuing to foster them. as early as in 1962. With the deepening of knowledge about crime prevention its primary objective, Japan established in Tokyo the United Nations' first specialized institute in that field, named the United Nations Asia and Far East Institute for the Prevention of Crime and the Treatment of Offenders. This institute was launched with the late Noble Morris, a renowned criminologist, as its inaugural director. By the end of September this year, it will have produced a large number of alumni. The total amounts to more than 5,900, including, for instance, 2,949 from Asia and 678 from Africa. Now, it was this past March that Malala Yousafzai was in Tokyo. She looked me right in the eye and said, as many as 100 million girls lack the skills they need to have a good command of modern technology, for they don't undergo a minimum education of 12 years. She says that if all girls completed secondary school, they could add up to $30 trillion to the global economy. I invited Malala to Japan before the G20 Osaka summit I would chair in June, hoping to highlight policies that empower women and girls. If women were able to demonstrate the potential they hold, the world would sparkle that much more. But that is an obvious truth, isn't it? In Japan, where the labor participation rate for women has seen a marked rise, we are witnessing that self-evident fact on a daily basis. I am delighted that we were able to capture what Malala advocates for in both the G20 Leaders Declaration and another outcome document in the annex. We pledge to promote inclusive, quality education for all girls and women. Japan wishes to run at all times at the very front of the pack with respect to these efforts. Now, let me tell you of an example from Tanzania. When I was turning 30 years of age, I remember a Tanzanian marathon runner, Juma Ikanga, was fiercely competitive every time he ran the Tokyo Marathon. After returning home in Tanzania, Mr. Ikanga, who considers Japan to be his second home, became a goodwill public relations ambassador at the local office of JICA, the government of Japan's agency for international cooperation. Sent from Japan to be stationed there was a woman full of energy named Miwa Ito. The two of them combined forces, with Ms. Ito getting sponsorship funding from 13 Japanese companies, and Mr. Ikanga searching for girls who could be future Olympians. Their efforts ultimately culminated in Tanzania's first ever women's track meet. That was in November 2017. 1,000 girls living nearby, attending elementary and junior high schools, were invited as spectators. But they were not there simply to watch the event. Educational materials on avoiding teenage pregnancy were also handed out. Having the girls read these materials was another purpose. In Arusha, Tanzania, an area the Maasai and others call home, where the high peak of Mount Kilimanjaro can be seen in the east-northeast, an all-girls junior high school named Sakura opened in January 2016 through the efforts of a group of Japanese people. The school is entirely residential in order to provide its students with absolute security and safety. The number of students has grown from 24 at the beginning to 162 this past spring. The Japanese government supports the school financially, but it is run by NGOs, both Japanese and local. They teach the STEM subjects of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and how to avoid unwanted pregnancies. In Cambodia as well, I know there is a Japanese entrepreneur who has been working to improve education there, a project that is entirely his own brainchild. His initiative sends Japanese teachers, seasoned veterans in math and science, to Cambodia. There, they coach young men and women who are on track to become teachers. The initiative is called Teachers Without Borders. I find it very much heartwarming to see people in Japan's private sector devoting themselves voluntarily in this way to the education of young people, especially girls, in Tanzania and in Cambodia, purely out of intrinsic motivation, without seeking anyone's recognition as such. Over the next 3 years, the government of Japan will provide enriched education to a minimum of 9 million children and young people in sub-Saharan African and Asian nations. We plan to expand e-learning for primary school children in Sri Lanka, as well as internet-based mathematics and science education in Rwanda. But I must say that these endeavors were largely inspired by the efforts underway by people in the private sector. Mr. Chairman, this is my 7th consecutive year to deliver a statement in the general debate at the General Assembly. Over this time, I have consistently emphasized the importance of empowering women and girls and the value of making health care universally available. This year, too, I have addressed both of these issues at separate meetings on the sidelines. At the same time, I wish to emphasize that the essence of Japan's international engagement can be found in the fact that we earnestly value education, as seen in the contributions of Japan that I just mentioned. Japan aspires to be an FP, shall I say, or a faster power when that fosters human capacity. As I reach the end of my statement, I will raise 3 points briefly. Point number 1 is regarding North Korea. Japan supports the approach taken by President Trump, the approach by which the two leaders talk candidly with each other and try to work out the issues at hand while seeing a bright future ahead, has changed the dynamics surrounding North Korea. I am determined to meet Chairman Kim Jong-un myself face-to-face without attaching any conditions. Japan's unchanging objective is to normalize its relations with North Korea through comprehensively resolving the outstanding issues of concern with North Korea, including the abductions, nuclear and missile issues, as well as settling the unfortunate past. Point number 2 is that Japan shares the concerns regarding the Middle East situation. The attack on Saudi Arabia's crude oil facilities was an extremely contemptible crime that holds the international economic order hostage. I consider precious the pronouncement made to me directly by Supreme Leader Khamenei of Iran, that he issued as a fatwa 3 repudiations regarding nuclear weapons, namely not to possess, produce, or use them, and has ensured thorough implementation of that fatwa. This morning, too, I held a summit meeting with President Rouhani, our 9th in total. It is my own unchanging role to call on Iran as a major power to take actions that are grounded in the wisdom derived from its rich history. Point number 3, and my final point, is that Japan will make use of multilateral frameworks and globalism to reduce disparities inter alia. On the heels of the TPP and the Japan-EU Economic Partnership Agreement, the RCEP is now poised to reach agreement, with Japan's contribution serving as a propelling force. The world will become more connected, leading more people to escape from poverty. In recent years, I chaired the G7 and G20 summits, as well as the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, or TICAD, 3 times, demonstrating repeatedly that multilateral frameworks do indeed have that role as a leveler. As a consequence, the terms quality infrastructure and a free and open Indo-Pacific have entered the lexicon of the international community I would like you to note. TCAD 7 held earlier this year was reborn as new TCAD. This is because the words to talk about Africa from now should by all means tell a story of investment and growth. In fact, the business forum held at the same time as the TCAD conference was jam-packed with businessmen and women from Africa and Japan and electric with eager enthusiasm. I also came out of the forum with the sense that new investment proposals and new projects are materializing quickly. Changes in Africa encourage us. The world does indeed change. We are able to change it through the efforts we make. And that confidence shall be reaffirmed right here in this great assembly hall. With that, I will end my statement. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan for his statement, and I request protocol to escort you, Excellency.